6 Catholic priests, in addition to probably about 100 priests, or 6 Catholic bishops and about 100 priests, have just celebrated a mass with a woman priestess in Italy at the Holy House of Loreto. We're going to be talking about that coming up next. So welcome back to Reason and Theology, Michael Lofton Show. I want to talk about a concerning situation. We've seen this before. It looks like it's happening again just recently, a few days ago. A mass was celebrated at the Holy House of Loreto in Italy, where you have a good 6 bishops, and probably about 100 priests who are present, all concelebrating at a mass for the Jubilee for the youth, the Jubilee that's going on right now in Rome. And participants of the Jubilee for the youth went to this liturgy, and you'll be able to see very, very clearly a female priestess. It's unclear, is she Protestant? Does she identify as Catholic? Either way, she presents herself as a priest wearing a clerical collar, and even participating in the liturgy, and especially in the consecration of the Eucharist, something that would be very concerning, obviously, given the position of Catholicism on the question of women's ordination, which we're going to take a look at here in a moment. So let me go ahead and maybe just show you a few video clips of what's going on so you can see this for yourself and not take my word for it. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and also enable audio so that you can hear it as well. I'm not going to play a whole lot, but I will play a few select clips here. Let's maybe go to the 5-minute mark, where they have the entrance procession. Around 5 minutes, 41 seconds, you can clearly see in the procession a female priestess. All right, so right here, you can clearly see her. Looks like there's a number of Eastern Catholic priests here. There's an Eastern Catholic priest. These are Eastern Catholic priests. These are Latin Rite priests. All the way in the back, you're going to see the bishops in the procession. But very, very clearly, this is a female presenting herself as a priest, wearing a clerical collar and vested, participating in the procession amidst all of the male priests. If you skip ahead just a little bit, you can see the bishops here. And I'm counting at least 6 bishops present. Okay, and this is at a Catholic church, and these are Catholic priests and Catholic bishops. Now, let's skip ahead just a little bit past the procession, past the beginning part of the liturgy. Let's skip ahead to the readings. I did find that interesting. Let's go to the 19-minute mark, 12 seconds, right around there. Take a look at this. So the reader, notice how the reader is dressed.
Dal libro della Genesi. Il Signore disse ad Abram, farò di te una grande
Good old
nazione.
Hard Rock Cafe Amsterdam t-shirt during the liturgy. I guess she recently went to Amsterdam. I feel sorry for her. I had a connecting flight in Amsterdam, so I spent a few hours there, and it was wow. It was discouraging to see Europe in such a state. Be that as it may, let's go to the probably most relevant part, which is going to be the consecration. They don't have the footage on her at the moment of consecration, but people who were present did confirm she was participating in that. And you can see she participates in the anaphora a little bit later, around the 50-minute mark, 12 seconds. She's right over here. So keep your eye on her over here on the right. Now notice she then extends her hand. As they're all concelebrating, extending their hands, she also is actively participating in the prayers here during the Eucharist. And so she's actively participating. Obviously, this is, as I'm going to demonstrate here in a moment, forbidden for laity to do. And also not just the issue of laity, but also Catholicism says there can't be any female priests because the church has no authority to do so. And so, in other words, there is no such thing as female priests. So any community that ordains women, they're not true ordinations. So skipping ahead just a little bit more to the 54-minute 1 second mark, you can see the sign of peace. And, you know, it's not as if the bishops present don't know that she's here or even actively participating. They know, they can clearly see her right here. But not only that, they even go up and greet her during the sign of peace. The principal celebrant and the other bishops, they go up and greet her. So again, it's not as if, well, she just snuck in there unaware and they just didn't see her or something. No, that's clearly not the case. Take a look at the sign of peace. So, see, going right up to her, giving her the sign of peace, acknowledging her. And you can see, again, her standing here the entire time during the liturgy of the Eucharist, right next to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 6 Eastern Catholic priests. These look like Byzantine priests, certainly Eastern Catholic. Some of them are vested, some of them are not. Some of them look like they're actively participating, some of them don't. But she certainly is, as again you could see here at the 50-minute mark. I'll play for that for you one more time. And again, during the, see, her hand is extended here. During the consecration, she also extended her hands according to people who were present there. Okay, so I think you see enough of the footage to see that this isn't just made up. This isn't, just something that is out of nowhere. This is clearly something that happened just a few days ago. There was no uproar. There was no incident where, I watched the whole liturgy. There was no incident where a priest said, "Hey, what are we doing?" No bishop said, "Hey, stop it. Hold on. This is wrong. This is sacrilegious. We're misleading people." None of that. Everything was absolutely normal. Even though it clearly wasn't normal, people acted like it was. So, and in fact, to further substantiate the point, you can see here from this source, the people present confirm that she was extending her hand during the consecration. They note here the Basilica of the Holy House of Loreto. This was on July 28th of 2025. The bishops of this region in Italy concelebrated Holy Mass to mark the Jubilee of the young people of their region during the entrance procession behind the deacon solemnly carrying the gospel book and following 3 priests without liturgical vestments. There are representatives of Eastern Catholic churches, probably non-Catholic. Okay, so they're suggesting these are not Eastern Catholic, they're Eastern Orthodox, which is why they weren't vested. Maybe that's the case. Maybe these were Eastern Orthodox priests, and some of them were Eastern Catholic priests, so maybe the ones who were vested were Eastern Catholic, the ones who weren't vested, Eastern Orthodox, which would be even more unusual for the Eastern Orthodox clergy to stand right next to a female priestess. Alongside the Catholic priest and wearing a cassock from which the ecclesiastical collar is visible, as we saw at the 5-minute mark, they say that she's likely a Lutheran pastor whose name we don't know. I don't know if that's true, if she's Lutheran, Anglican, or if she's Catholic pretending to be a priestess. I don't know. We don't know who she is. She then took her place in the presbytery alongside a priest, where she remained throughout the Eucharistic celebration, presided over by the Archbishop Pesaro Urbania Sant'Angelo in Vado, Monsignor Sandro Salvucci, which I looked him up here on Wikipedia. Let's see here. Italian Catholic Archbishop. So he's an Archbishop since the 12th of March, 2022. And yeah, so he's been in ministry for some time and has a pretty high status as an Archbishop. He's secretary of the Episcopal Conference of, not exactly sure how to pronounce the region, March, in Italy. And so he evidently has some status in the church. A worshiper present testified that during the conversation, the minister extended her hand as a sign of concelebration. That part, again, isn't in the footage, but we see it later on, a few minutes later, her again attempting to actively participate. So, unfortunately, the video of the celebration does not allow us to confirm this. However, when the bishop resumed the Eucharistic prayer immediately after the acclamation of the faithful, she could be extending her hand again at the 50-minute mark, which is why I think the testimony is true, which makes it highly probable that she made the same gesture during the words of consecration. Right. Okay, so therefore it seems that all the elements are present to suggest that the woman evidently belonging to a Christian community does not have apostolic succession and does not recognize the sacramental dignity of priestly ordination. And then they're going to talk a little bit about the Code of Canon Law, which we're going to go ahead and take a look at. But again, this was celebrated as part of the Jubilee for the youth in Loreto at the Basilica of the Holy House, very well-known basilica. It's a Marian shrine in Loreto, Italy. The basilica is known for enshrining the house in which it's believed the Blessed Virgin Mary is believed by some Catholics to have lived. Pious legend claims the same house was flown over by angelic beings from Nazareth to a number of locations before arriving at the current site. So you've likely heard of the Holy House of Loreto. So that's where this took place. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind here, just theologically speaking. You've probably seen this before if you've watched any of my shows on this topic, but if you're new to the discussion, let's quickly review it. By the way, let me remind you, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new to the channel, hit that sub button, hit the like button. I'd really appreciate your support. This is an apostolic letter from Pope St. John Paul II. Called Ordinatio Sacerdotalis, on the question of can women be ordained to the priesthood. And it's kind of the infallible, definitive statement on the matter. Some, in fact, argue that this is ex cathedra. Be that as it may, it's still an infallible decision, whether ex cathedra or ordinary and universal magisterium. Either way, it's certainly an infallible teaching. And you can see that here in paragraph 4. Where it talks about the situation. And he says, look, some people are still in doubt on the question of whether or not women can be made priests. And he says, look, this has been against the ordinary and universal magisterium. The church and sacred tradition has always taught against this. But just in order to remove all doubt, he says, wherefore, in order that all doubt may be removed. So if anybody was unclear up until this point, regarding a matter of great importance, a matter which pertains to the church's divine constitution itself. So he's not saying this is just kind of like a discipline that can change later on. He's saying this is essential to the structure of the church. Like if you tamper with this, you're no longer the Catholic Church. In virtue of my ministry, he's kind of using ex cathedra language, confirming the brethren, I declare that the church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women, and that this judgment is to be definitively held by the church's faithful. That's an infallible statement. That's to say, not only is this taught infallibly, but also this can never be changed, to be definitively held. It can never be reversed. So when you see a pope use that kind of language, this is not one of those things that's merely disciplinary. This is not one of those teachings that's taught in a non-infallible way that could potentially be reversed. This is one of those teachings, matters of faith and morals, doctrine, that can never be reformed. Hence, to be definitively held. And for that language specifically, you can read more about it in the commentary by Ratzinger, later known as Pope Benedict XVI, and Bertone, at the time Archbishop Bertone, now Cardinal Bertone. They have a commentary on the profession of faith, and they speak about this kind of language of to be held definitively, and they'll point out this is language of infallibility, like a teaching that can never be changed or reversed. So again, on the question of the priesthood, they're not talking specifically about the diaconate or anything like that, but on the question of the priesthood, this document says excluded, can't happen. And that was given in 1994. So this has been out for a while, and it's not unknown to the clergy. You know, the bishops are aware of it. The bishops who are present there, they're aware of this. The priests that are there, and there's a lot of them behind the scenes that show up towards the end. You don't always see them on video, but there's a lot of them. They're aware of this. They know this document. This isn't like something that's just hidden in the corners of the internet somewhere. This is well known, right? So there's kind of no excuse of ignorance here. Now, the Code of Canon Law talks about this situation in a number of ways. If you look at Canon 908 for the Latin Rite, it says Catholic priests are forbidden to concelebrate the Eucharist with priests or ministers of churches or ecclesial communities which do not have full communion with the Catholic Church. And so this is, and by the way, it also notes this in Canon 907, in the Eucharistic celebration, deacons and laypersons are not permitted to offer prayers, especially the Eucharistic prayer, or to perform actions which are proper to the celebrating priest, which we saw the lady do, right? So that's against Canon 907. She's a layman, and she's not allowed to participate in this kind of way. And then also Catholic ministers and priests are not allowed to concelebrate with ministers of other communities, such as her community, and her specifically. But not only that, let me show you this. This is from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. It's a general decree regarding the delict of an attempted sacred ordination of a woman. So if a Catholic lady were to attempt to be ordained, what happens to her and what happens to the Catholic minister who attempts to ordain her? Well, it says this: in order to protect the nature and validity of the sacrament of order, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, in virtue of the special faculty given by the supreme authority of the Church, without prejudice to the prescript of Canon 1378, both the one who attempts to confer the sacred order on a woman, so the bishop, and the woman who attempts to receive a sacred order, incur an automatic excommunication that can only be lifted by the apostolic see, which would be the papacy, right? The Pope and his representatives. So if a Catholic woman were to attempt to do this, the bishop's automatically excommunicated and the Catholic woman's automatically excommunicated, and it can only be lifted by the Pope or one of his representatives. Okay. Now, obviously, this isn't in reference to a non-Catholic, because a non-Catholic already isn't in communion with the Catholic Church, certainly not full communion. So this is talking about Catholics. So if this were a Catholic lady who attempted ordination, she would be automatically excommunicated, as would the bishop who attempted to do it. If she's a non-Catholic and, whatever community she's in attempts to ordain her, the Catholic Church says she cannot participate in the liturgy, and Catholic priests cannot participate with her in a liturgy. Canon 907 and 908. So, regardless of her status, who she is, what took place here is something that's absolutely forbidden by the church. And it's unfortunately not the first time that this has happened. Recently, we saw another situation in Brazil. Now, so far, we haven't heard anything. There hasn't been any kind of uproar. There hasn't been any kind of concern shown. There hasn't been any kind of public explanation or correction or rebuke or revoking of this. I mean, nothing. It's just been allowed. It's just been tolerated. And, it reminds me of the situation, as I've been talking to y'all about recently, where you have these Catholic pride masses, gay masses, where you'll have a Catholic priest celebrating pride and gayness openly at the mass, with rainbow flags and everything. And, I've shown a number of cases where that's been happening recently and has been happening for years, and in the vast majority of cases, there's no correction. In some cases, bishops are participating in these pride masses, and showing their support for it. No correction from Rome, no correction from the bishop, no correction from, anybody. And we've been seeing that, and I've been pointing out that, obviously this is against the law of the church. It's also obviously against morals in Catholic teaching, but it's being allowed. People know it's happening. The Pope's aware of it. Bishops are aware, but at the very least, they're just turning the other way and just allowing it to occur with no correction and no prevention of it happening again in the future in most cases. To which point I have to say, well, what good is having the doctrine if it's not enforced and it's allowed to be undermined? You might as well not even have the doctrine at that point. So I have to say that here as well, not just about pride masses, but about situations like this. Hey, what's the point in having a teaching that's infallible if it's allowed to be undermined in this kind of public way? Unless this is addressed and correctly fixed, this is just basically going to be saying, you know what? We say this is the doctrine, but in reality, we don't really believe this is the doctrine. And at that point, what's the point of having the doctrine? So it will be interesting to see if Pope Leo does anything about this, or if he just kind of, allows it to happen and doesn't say anything, which would be very unfortunate and very tragic. And again, as I've pointed out to you guys before, silence is being complicit and really not correcting something when you're in a position to correct it is an implicit affirmation of what's taking place. If I were to tell my children, don't leave the house at night, after 10 o'clock at night or something, not that they would, but let's just say hypothetically, I told them, do not leave the house after 10 o'clock at night. But I see them consistently leaving the house, after 10. I don't say anything. Either when they leave or when they come back, I don't say anything. I repeat the teaching or my instruction and my rule. Hey, don't do this. But, I don't do it. And I allow it. I see them walking out and they see me seeing them walking out. Well, hey, what's the point of having the rule? And doesn't this also then give license to my other children to do the same? It tells them, hey, Dad doesn't really care. He says this, he has his rule, but he doesn't really back it up. And so maybe we can leave the house too, right? So it gives license to future bishops to say, you know what? I'm in favor of this. I don't believe this infallible teaching of the church. I don't believe that. I think the church is wrong. I'm a Catholic bishop and I'm going to stay here and I'm going to try to change the church from within. And one of the ways I'm going to do that is by allowing a woman to come and celebrate with me. It just gives justification for bishops who are attempting to change the church in ways that really can't. And I think also what this does is it honestly takes away any ability to kind of criticize the Anglican communion, because honestly, this is exactly what happened with the Anglican communion. So when this kind of stuff takes place with the gay masses, the pride masses, and then women clergy and stuff like that, one can no longer say, oh, the Anglican communion, look out how messed up they are. Come home to Rome where we don't have these problems. Well, Okay, on paper, these things are condemned. But if in reality and in practice, it's being allowed, you can't really say to the Anglicans anymore, come home to Rome as a solution to the problems that the Anglicans are experiencing, because they're going to say, I would just be coming to the same problem that I already have. So it also discourages converts to Catholicism, either new converts. There are probably some new converts who are coming from the Anglican community are probably, wondering what in the world's going on. I just left this stuff just to come to the Catholic Church and find it's here. Or potential converts who are interested but haven't yet made that commitment. They're probably thinking, well, wait, if this is what's going on, I'm going to go to Eastern Orthodoxy or something. Or even people who are currently in the process of converting, they're probably going to be like, wait, I don't know, I need to take a step back and rethink this thing. Maybe I'm making the wrong decision. So it's going to have impact on people like that as well. These are things that have to be considered. And you have to ask at the end of the day, what is the message the church is trying to communicate? Is it trying to communicate, look, we really believe this deposit of faith. We really believe these teachings, these infallible teachings. We really believe this stuff that's handed on by the apostles. Or is the message, you know what? We're going to try to get away from that. We're not going to say we're going to get away from it, right? I mean, you can't come out in the open and just contradict the doctrine, but we're just going to kind of quietly dismiss those teachings, and we're in practice going to just pretend that they don't exist. What's the message that's being communicated with this is my question. What will people take away from this at the end of the day? That the church believes its own dogmas, or maybe not so much? Now, you might say, well, this isn't the entire church speaking here. Look, there's a lot of ways to look at this. I understand. But if it's allowed to happen at the end of the day and there's no correction, it's effectively an affirmation that this is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. At which point, there's no point in having the doctrine. So this is one of the problems that I'm saying. Grabbing some questions here from the chat and comments, Jethro says, it seems church leadership has been afraid of the public media reaction since the abuse scandals. I don't know about that. It seems to me that the public media reaction would be, hey, what in the world is going on here? This is contrary to the teachings, right? What about that public media reaction? But more importantly, is that really what it's about? Is that the focus? How will people react? I thought the focus was, let's guard and preserve this deposit of faith from the apostles. I thought that was the purpose. Not, what does the world think of me? What does the media think of me? If that's the angle, you could throw away a lot of the doctrines of the church at that point, because the world thinks very poorly of a lot of the doctrines of the church. So, okay, looking through comments and questions here. What else do we have? One commenter says they may be handling it quietly. Look, I don't think they are, but even if they were, that's not sufficient. Public scandal has to be addressed publicly, not privately. Because again, what is the message that's communicated publicly? That women's ordination is perfectly fine. That the church was wrong. That's the message that's being conveyed publicly. If that's only addressed somehow privately, that message is still out there publicly. So it's not sufficient to address this behind the scenes, which I don't believe is happening anyway. Ponti says, I think the public media reaction is more like the church is finally getting along with the signs of the times and reforming as it should, right? Which would then validate the world. But then the church is no longer a witness to the world. It's now part of the world in a negative way. It's no longer that prophetic voice to the world. It's now rather allowing the world to be a prophetic voice to the church. But I thought the church was supposed to be a prophetic voice to the world and to mankind. Seems that this would be the opposite. Ponte says, there's a substantial number of Catholics who believe that their church should reform in the issues of women's ordination and gay marriage. That's true. There are. To which I want to say, look, if you're a Catholic who believes that, I kind of feel like, what are you doing wasting your time with Catholicism? It seems to me like you're in a community that says infallibly this is wrong, and you're trying to change that. Wouldn't you be better off in another community who actually openly just affirms what you want to believe? It seems a little bit more honest to do that than stay around and subvert the church and try to undermine the church. That seems dishonest to me, right? So Mike says, I think it's more about people not understanding why women can't be ordained rather than them wanting a reform. So a lot of people don't understand it. And of course, you can read Ordinatio Sacerdotalis for some of the reasons that John Paul II gives. But, whether they understand the reasons or not is kind of irrelevant, right? At the end of the day, does the church have the authority to speak on these issues? If the answer is yes, whether you understand it or not, it is what it is. If the answer is no, then my thing is, why are you wasting your time with the Catholic Church if you don't actually believe what it believes? Seems odd. Congrats to Shell. He says, hey y'all, wife gave birth to kid number 3, daughter number 2 on Saturday. That's awesome. Congrats to you. Good to see you. Rob says, this is a continuation of the last 12 years, isn't it? No, this is a problem that preceded or was before Pope Francis. This was going on before him. This is not just Pope Francis's pontificate. These are problems that we've seen under John Paul II, Benedict, Pope Francis, and now under Pope Leo. It's not just 12 years old. It's older than that. Okay. Let's see. Do I need to change my name to get my question answered? I don't know what your question is. So let's see. At what point does the allowance of rebellion become a falsification of the church? I'm currently a Protestant, but I'm interested in Roman Catholicism. Well, case in point, right? Isn't this what I just mentioned earlier? This is going to deter people from wanting to become Catholic. And yeah, at what point does discipline falsify the church? Yeah, I can't say that I have any kind of solid answer there, because of course a person can always say, but look, abuse doesn't negate proper use, or just because the teaching is undermined doesn't mean the teaching isn't true, kind of thing. So like there's always going to be a way to look at it in a way that says, I still believe the teachings, I still believe the promises. There's all of that, like there's always a way to do that, right? So I don't know if you can ever say there's a moment where an abuse disproves the claims. I don't know if that's really the way it works. But I can certainly say it undermines the claims, right? I can safely say that it undermines it. And I can go so far as to say it makes the claims useless. If I tell my kids don't leave after 10 p.m., but I'm constantly allowing them, it makes the rule useless. Does it falsify my position as a father? Probably not. I don't think it works that way, but it does make my rule useless. So it makes the teaching useless at some point. And I think that's just as much of a problem. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay. The lack of discipline on these points also undermines efforts to bring radical traditionalists instead of a contest back into full unity because it serves as massive scandal. Well, these are the things that the radical traditionalists have always pointed out. And as I've said for years, they have some legitimate grievances. The problem is the way in which they react to it isn't always a solution. It's usually aggravating the situation. It's offering a problem as a solution to an existing problem. Or sometimes they'll misrepresent what's going on or misunderstand what's going on. But in cases like this, they're going to be right to say, look, this is wrong. Yeah, absolutely. I think that, they would have a legitimate grievance here. But whether or not particular individuals in this group would offer the appropriate solution is a different question. Often they don't. They end up making the situation worse with solutions that are no solutions at all. So kind of like Martin Luther had some legitimate grievances but went about it wrongly. Sure. And Catholicism ended up backing up and vindicating some of his grievances, not only at the Council of Trent, but also in the post-conciliar period, post-Vatican II. It's an acknowledgement that he had some legitimate grievances, even if it's not an endorsement of all of his positions and all of his actions. Obviously, the church has judged that some of his actions and teachings were false and heretical and condemned. But it has vindicated some of his actions and some of his grievances, namely in the areas of abuse, but also in some of his complaints about some liturgical aspects. So, was Peter married? It appears that he was. Why are Catholics freaked out over married priesthood? I think you might have some, but of course you have a married priesthood in Catholicism with Eastern Catholics, and there are a few married Latin Rite priests. You might not know about it, but there are a few. It is allowed in rare cases for Latin Rite priests to be married. It's not very common, but it happens. Okay, so hopefully that helps answer the questions and makes known to you all my thoughts on the matter. Hopefully it gives you some important reflections on this situation. I do want to hear from you, of course. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to put them in the comment section. And also, I would really, really appreciate your support of the channel by hitting that subscribe button and hitting the like button. If you think that this is a video that more people need to see, help me do that by reaching them. And the best way to do that is to get the algorithm going by engaging this video with comments, likes, subscriptions, all of that stuff. And also, if you want to financially support what I'm doing here, I'd really appreciate that too as well. A good way to do that is visit Patreon, patreon.com/reason and theology. You'll get access to extra patron-only material, and you'll be supporting what I'm doing here so I can continue to offer free material every day to everyone. So please consider doing that, or you could just hit the join button right here on YouTube, right next to the subscribe button, and you'll get access to those extra patron-only material and support financially what I'm doing here so I can continue to offer this kind of content. So if you've benefited from the channel, you appreciate it, and you want to see more, I need to hear from you. I really need your support. Consider doing that. Okay, so that is going to do it for now. One fair question to ask here was, could this woman be a deaconess? I don't think so, but hey, you know what? Even if so, everything that I've just said still applies. Everything I've just said. Canon 907, Canon 908. All of that still applies, and this would have been something that was, frankly, sacrilegious and it should never have been allowed, and it sends the wrong message. So literally everything I said would still apply, minus ordinatio sacerdotalis, because that's specifically about priests. But everything else still applies. So it really would kind of be a moot point. But yeah, she's not a deaconess, right? She's attempting to extend her hand during the consecration. This is a woman who thinks she's a priest. So it creates some serious problems. And again, it is sacrilegious. And so there's a major problem here. There is a major scandal. It needs to be addressed and addressed swiftly. As I said, this was July 28th. We haven't heard anything weeks later. I doubt very seriously, therefore, anything's going to happen. So that's just the reality. All right. See y'all soon for more. God bless.